This is the first iPad in years that has really changed the look and feel of the product. The complete redesign for 2018 gives you a smaller package without really sacrificing features. Now, it's been a few months since the new iPad was released, and now that the kind of shiny new paint has worn off, it's now easier to see what the iPad is really good at. I'm Matt Gonzalez with the Apple Circle. Let's take a closer look. This is a striking product. When you pick it up for the first time, you immediately notice the difference compared to older iPads. The squared off edges take a little bit to get used to, but it makes it feel overall thinner and just easier to hold. Plus, the smaller bezels all around add to that. It's just a sleek device any way you look at it. Yes, there is some concern about bending, but out of all the units that we have, none of them have that issue, and it doesn't really feel fragile even though it is so thin. The screen is also just gorgeous here. The ProMotion display is smooth and has great color. I do wish it was a little brighter. It's not amazing outdoors, but pretty much anywhere else, it is great. And above that screen is another favorite feature, and that's Face ID. It works better than it does on the iPhone, surprisingly. I've had less failed unlock attempts. It works in every orientation, and most importantly, it works in some really awkward angles where you just wouldn't expect it to work, but it does. So even more here with the iPad, you start to forget that you're even unlocking it and you just use it. And the accessories you can get for the iPad, like the Apple Pencil and the keyboard, are more integrated. The Pencil works great just like always, but being able to store it on the side of the iPad means I always have it with me, and in turn, I actually use it much more than I used to. Same goes for the keyboard. Now it protects the front and the back, which is great. The keyboard still is a love it or hate it kind of thing, but there is some improvement over the previous model, and for the most part, I've gotten used to using it. Any way you look at it, the design of the new iPad is a big step forward, and it is impressive even after all this time. That shiny paint is still shiny. The big question when the iPad was released was, can it replace your laptop? Now, I'm not going to go in depth with that here. It's a very personal decision and varies depending on what you do. But for what the iPad claims it does, this is the most powerful version of it by far. Inside is Apple's A12X Bionic processor with 4 GB of RAM standard. You can go higher than that if you want to get the 1 TB storage option, and that'll give you 6 GB of RAM. But this is the most powerful iOS device ever, and it shows in use. What I've noticed after a few months of using it is that nothing seems to ever stutter. It's always on top of its game and does what you tell it to do when you tell it to do it. And you can't say that for a lot of products. For me, that's editing photos in Lightroom, or watching video on YouTube, or writing in Google Docs. These tasks have never felt cumbersome, but even when doing more intensive tasks like editing in LumaFusion, still the iPad handles it like a champ, even after weeks of use. There is something to be said about the iPad not doing enough though. I've had points where I wish I had more control over what the iPad can do. For instance, accessing connected storage devices. You just can't easily do that like you'd expect. Yes, it has that USB-C port built in, but it's still limited even though it doesn't really need to be. And because the iPad Pro is so powerful, it's obvious that it's capable of doing more. And the current version of iOS 12 just doesn't let you do that much. There are rumors that iOS 13 might be that update that we're hoping for that would give us more control over what the iPad can do and make it more of a quote-unquote laptop replacement, but at this point, it's just wishful thinking. And the more I use the iPad Pro, the more I want it to do more. The hardware is that good that I think the software needs to catch up. And that is where price comes in. These iPads and accessories are noticeably more expensive than previous models. Now, whether or not that increase is worth it really depends on what you're getting out of the iPad. For my use case, I have found it to be more or less worthwhile to have spent a little more. I am using the iPad more often and for more things, and I'm getting my money's worth at this point. I think the hardware is worth it, but if iOS is your kind of sticking point, it might be best to just wait a few months and see what iOS 13 has to offer. This is the first iPad in a while that I've continued to use. After 2 months, I still pick it up every day and use it for more than just consuming content. The form factor and the power makes it feel like something that works for me rather than something I am working around, for the most part. And if Apple does what we all hope they do, the future of the iPad Pro line is going to be bright.